If you're like me, you've been watching these Tears of the Kingdom trailers getting hyped for this week's launch of the new Zelda game. But I realize this might be the first Zelda game in a long while I don't play at launch. And it's so that a new generation can play it, specifically my son. Welcome back, Classy Crew, to an introspective video where I really wanted to dig into this passion of mine, the Zelda franchise, which I don't cover much on this channel. And I don't really know how this video is going to come out. It's going to be a bit of a raw video because this franchise has grown to mean so much to me, to be one of my defining franchise in my video game aspect of my life. And I'm sure it's become iconic in most of your lives. I mean, the Legend of Zelda is such an iconic franchise. It's been around forever. In fact, it launched, I shouldn't date myself, but it pretty much launched around the time I was born. That said, I didn't actually get into the Zelda franchise until way older, when I was 14, and my entry point to that was Ocarina of Time. I was somewhat familiar with the Zelda franchise. I was in video games since I was, as far as I can remember, I was playing like Ninja Turtles 2 on the NES. I'll spare you, well, I won't spare you. I'm going to get into the details of why, how I got into this franchise and how I went from, just discovering at 14 until now. But what's very different this time around with this new Zelda launch is my own son is now 14 and has developed his own love of the Zelda franchise. And it's gone to the point where I would say it's on par with mine, and even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. But he has actually refused to watch any trailers. He wants to go into this game blind. At home we only have one Switch and we share it, and that's not a problem usually because our game interests don't overlap a lot. So oftentimes when a new game launches on the Switch, if I like it, I'm playing it and he's playing on another platform, or I'll be playing on Steam, and then if a game he really likes launches on Switch, he'll be playing. But this is really the first time that a single player only game launches on Switch that we both really want to play. And I've thought about this. I go, do I buy him a new Switch? But those are expensive, and I think that'd be a little too frugal on my part. And I realized, you know what? I think it's time for me to let him embrace, like, this is such a pivotal moment in his life. It's time for me to let go and for him to experience it. And so I don't know if he's going to watch this before launch. I kind of hope he doesn't, but I plan on getting this game for him so that he can experience this game for himself without me knowing anything about it. And in the meantime, I'll probably be there and I'll see the game, so it'll be technically spoiled for me, but I think it's a worthwhile spoiler. So he's going to get a head start on the game, and I think it's going to be an experience I can't really relate. Like, I've never experienced this. I've always introduced him to games I know, or when we play new games, they're oftentimes multiplayer, so we are discovering them together. But this will be the first time I let him play a single player game I know nothing about, that I absolutely want to play, and that will be somewhat spoiled by watching him play it. Now, that will just be for the first weekend. Eventually, he's probably going to get so far ahead of me, and we're going to have different schedules where I can finally play the game on my own and go off and make my own adventure. But it really made me kind of just sit and think about how this franchise has changed so much from being this teenager and I remember so much of my Zelda experiences so clearly. When I was 14, I kept seeing my friends for years before that playing Ocarina of Time. I remember seeing them with the N64 cart, and it was a gold cartridge. I was like, oh my god, they make these in gold, this looks so cool. And I would watch them play it, and it always looked so cool whenever I was over. So finally, I'd never owned an N64, but one summer, and this was around the time the N64 was getting less appealing, so my friends were more willing to lend me an N64 for long periods of time. And one summer, I borrowed it for a month, and I got a copy of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and I just played like 8 hours a day of that. It was one of the most magical summers I've ever had. I remember like just digging into that game and being like, what's next? What's over that horizon? What's gonna happen, to all these elements of the story? This music is amazing. And that's when I pretty much fell in love with this game. I'm like, I need to learn more about this. Give me more. And not too long after, I remember the Majora's Mask launched, and it was around the time when I finally got my hands on it. I got a 1 week break in school. Here they call it March break, so it's like a spring break. So I went to like a Blockbuster. I rented an N64 for a week, got Majora's Mask, not knowing too much about the game, And it's kind of ironic because I basically had 1 week to finish, which plays very well to the theme of Majora's Mask, where it's like, you have 3 days to save the kingdom or save the land from this moon. And oh my goodness, I didn't do it on my own. I had to resort to a strategy guide to help me get it, but like I was determined to beat this game, and I didn't get to rent a console very often. So like this was an opportunity, and I wanted to experience Majora's Mask as much as I could. Luckily, that was the last time I had to really rush through a Zelda game, because after that I got to take my time. I discovered all of the handheld games, so I got into Link's Awakening. Oh, before that, I actually got a copy of A Link to the Past. And wow, that game just blew me away. Like the freaking theme in Dark World, the whole story, like that really elevated the Zelda experience, where I really started understanding, because Majora's Mask is so different from Ocarina of Time. But Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, that's when I started understanding the building blocks of like the core Zelda experience. I was like, oh, I love this. I want more of it. And then I got into Link's Awakening. I got into the Oracle of Ages season. And around this time, the new Zelda game on the GameCube was launching, Wind Waker. And I remember seeing that, and there was a lot of backlash at the time, because shortly before Wind Waker was revealed, there was a GameCube demo showcasing what Zelda could look like on the GameCube, and it showed Link fighting this like really cool spider in what looked like HD at the time. I mean, it wasn't, and it looked so awesome. And then they're like, wouldn't that be cool on the GameCube? And we're all like, yeah. And they're like, here you go, here's Wind Waker, a very cartoony game where everyone's like, what is this? And it was not received well. And I remember playing it, and it was like, I felt kind of mediocre about it. It wasn't until the Wii U HD version came out where I really learned to appreciate it. And Wind Waker is actually one of my favorite games now. And this was one of the games I tried to get my son into when he was younger. So since he was a young age, I've slowly been slipping like games in front of him to play. He really got hooked on Pokemon, of course the Mario franchise, but I was like, surely he would love the Zelda franchise. And I thought Wind Waker would be a great starting point, especially when he was younger, like between the ages of like 6 and 9. But he would never, like, he would watch me play a little bit, he would pick up the controller and move Link around, but he never really got it. So anyways, back in my own journey, so Wind Waker, played it, didn't appreciate it until much later. Then Twilight Princess came out, and that was the game we wanted. That was the hyper-realistic game. And this was a point where like that just fueled my, because I feel Twilight Princess plays more to the themes that we see in Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past. Like it just kind of builds up, gives you a little bit more of a mature setting. Everything is more gritty, and I loved it. It's funny though, because now I actually prefer Wind Waker over Twilight Princess. And then Skyward Sword came out on the Wii. Now it's worth noting, at this point in my life, gaming was not what it is today. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. It was still very much a hobby, and I was surrounded by an entourage that didn't really encourage gaming, so it was kind of like a guilty hobby I had to do on my own. I didn't really have anybody to share it with. I don't want to get into too much detail, but it was basically it wasn't the best days of my life. Let's just put it lightly like that. But soon after that is really the chapter where I embraced my gaming passion to the fullest. And this is close to when Link Between Worlds came out. And from this point on is when I started buying all new Zelda games at launch, and I really surrounded myself with the Zelda community and found fans to share this passion with. And it's around the time I got into YouTube and all of that. So that's like 10 plus years ago. Or 10 years. Let's not put too many years to that. So from that point, Link Between Worlds, Triforce Heroes, Breath of the Wild, Hyrule Wars, all of these launches, and I know Triforce Heroes is a weird one. I hated that game. But anyways, all of those games became iconic moments that I got to plan around, and I would take time off and I would play it on launch day. And Breath of the Wild was the biggest one. I remember I was only planning to get the game, and I went to GameStop, and there was all this Breath of the Wild stuff everywhere. I was like, oh, I got to get this amiibo, and I got the Zelda amiibo, and then I got the Guardian amiibo. I'm like, I need the Link one too, so I got the Link with the shooting the bow, and I got the guide. I got the book just because the book looked awesome, and I was on this high of I need all the Breath of the Wild stuff. So I got that, brought it home, I played it, and something happened here, because my son would watch me play Breath of the Wild, and he was pulled way more into this game, and he would love just watching me traverse the land and do stuff. And eventually he would play it on, pick it up on his own, And he would try things, but you could see he really struggled because either the fights were too hard and he would complain, oh, it's too hard. And I'm of the belief, I'm not going to help you. I'm the kind of parent that's, no, to really appreciate the game, you have to be challenged by the game and you have to overcome the challenge, which is what fires off like the dopamine, which makes you love the game. Monster Hunter fans, right? And there's something that happened between his ages of 10 to 12 where he really started challenging himself in games. And I don't know what was the trigger, what happened specifically. I can't point and say it's because of this, but he started revisiting games he had troubles with after he had these major breakthroughs in games of, oh, I'm better at games than I remember, or oh, I can overcome these challenges. And I remember him going back to Breath of the Wild, and the game hooked into him. He could feel himself getting better at the game, getting stronger at the game, being able to solve the puzzles, being better at the combat, and he just destroyed everything. And he's the type of player where he's not just goal-oriented like me, but he will live and breathe the game and try to do trick shots and try to like really figure out all the little things that you can do in the game. So he has just been surrounding himself with this game. And it has been amazing to see him grow as a person through video games, through the Zelda franchise. So with Tears of the Kingdom, it's this moment I think that will really stand out in his life the way that Ocarina of Time stood out for me. And I can't wait to see him, experience it. I think I did show him the first trailer where he does know the main gimmick of the game, through fusion and all that, but everything else, the second trailer that showed a lot of stuff, he doesn't know anything about that. He's been keeping himself pretty much sealed off from the rest of what the game has to offer. So to see, I think this is going to be just so amazing to just experience that, to experience him experiencing a game that I know nothing about. So technically we're going to be experiencing it together, but this time I'll be experiencing it as a spectator first and foremost. So those are my thoughts on this week of Zelda as a new Zelda game launches, and my experience is going to be different. I'd love to hear like, what is your experience with The Legend of Zelda? I assume if you've watched this video this far, I've kept your interest long enough that you probably have your own stories, and maybe you're old enough to have kids of your own, and Zelda has taken maybe a new meaning to your life, or perhaps you've gone through a different path, and whatever, this franchise probably defined your life in some way. Or maybe it's just a game you enjoy playing and it means nothing, and you just like the music or the cool puzzles, and that's okay too. Let me know in the comments, and otherwise I will see you on the next video. Until next time, keep it classy.